Welcome to Playing with Fire, the podcast for people who are ready to custom build their love.
We're talking about non-monogamy, however you design it, as an individuation opportunity.
Want to leave the default and make your life spectacularly you? You're in the right place.
Marie Thouin, PhD, is the author of What is Compersion? Understanding Positive Empathy in Consensually Non-Monogamous Relationships, the first ever comprehensive book on compersion. Marie has published seminal research studies, the first encyclopedia entry on compersion, and is the creator of whatiscompersion.com, a popular website that features her research blogs and a list of research on the topic of compersion. Her work has been featured in several magazines and podcasts, including Elle, The Savage Lovecast, and Multi-Amory. She's the founder of Love Insight, a mindful dating and relationship coaching practice, where she supports and guides people of all backgrounds and relational orientations to create intentional and vibrant love lives. Marie, welcome.
Yay!
Hello. Thank you so much for having me again on the podcast. I just love being with you both.
Well, we had to have you back for many reasons. One is you and I could literally just talk all day. So there's that. And you have a book. You have a book, baby. Yay!
Yes,
There's a book,
my first
baby.
baby.
So exciting. So I was excited to have this opportunity. I know you're making the rounds in the podcast world. So if anybody is like, wow, there's so much to cover here, and I wonder where else, Marie's got a book, and she has also been making the rounds with all the experts. It's amazing. I've been loving watching your episodes drop recently. And I just want to say, as we start off, I see the growth and development and deepening of your work over the last couple of years, and it's really amazing to witness. I really, really love it.
Thank you. That means so much to me. Because,
So-
sometimes I feel like I'm in a whirlwind. There's just so much to discover, so much to talk about. I'm having new insights every day with my coaching clients, not just my research. So, yes, I just don't have enough of 24 hours in a day to just talk about everything I'm discovering. And it's really fascinating.
Right. And I thought it was important to have you back because that's exactly when you're doing research driven coaching, we're the researcher, it puts us in a unique position. And you and I both work from this spot, the unique position of being in the development of concepts and also constantly updating our work. And so I want to make sure that people don't see a flatness. Like compersion is a living concept that is coming into being because we're talking about it. And I love that. So
Yeah,
thank you.
You're researching the thing and developing it. So as you do the research, it becomes something else. And then you have to research that. And then you have to find out how people are interacting with it in the world. And I watch you do the work. And wow, it's so valuable.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it feels almost like a kind of three-prong approach to learning about compersion. One is the academic research, which is interviewing people, asking them how they experience compersion, etc. The second one is my coaching practice, talking to people who are in non-monogamous relationships or living it, breathing it. And the third is my own experience as a human with emotions, with relationships, with envy, jealousy, compersion, everything that I'm observing is, all of these things are coming into my quote unquote research brain and interacting.
Yeah. I hear you bringing reflexivity forward. So I just love it. I'm excited. And because you're a researcher and your book that I'm not sure when this is going to land. It's either just come out or it's about to come out, but go get your copy right now. There'll be a link in the show notes. You are the person to ask. Would you please define compersion for us?
I'm glad you asked. Actually, so my colleague Sharon Flicker and I just published the first ever encyclopedia definition of compersion last year in 2023. And after a lot of conversation, which is, maybe that's another prong of research I did not mention that I should mention, is a lot of conversations with my colleagues, researchers and coaches. That's really important as well. So through a lot of conversation, we came up with a 3-part definition because we wanted to get away from, I guess, the traditional understanding of compersion as just an emotion. I think if you Google compersion, most people would say, like, well, it's feeling happy for your lover's other relationships, other intimate relationships. And that's true, but that's only one definition. So the three definitions, let me give them to you in order. The first one is the range of positive emotions that you feel in relations to your partner's other intimate relationships. So that's kind of the standard understanding of compersion. I'm happy that you're happy with someone else in consensual non monogamy. The second definition, however, and that came out of my research, and that is the attitudinal side of things. So it's the range of positive attitudes, thoughts, and behaviors that one might experience in relation to their partner's other intimate relationships. Again, in a non monogamous context. So getting
Yeah.
a
And
move
you and I
the
were
emotions.
researching at the same time, and attitudinal versus enacted was present in my studies too. Like my research would totally back yours up
Oh,
in this
wow,
way. It was
cool.
not a focus point for the research,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
when I was looking up my own stuff, I'm like, oh, what a thank goodness you saw this and named it, because I think it's central. And I saw it as just an artifact. I didn't see how it's central to the concept of compersion. So
Hmm.
I'm so glad you centered that in the definitions.
Yes, thank you. And the third one is outside of non monogamy, people are starting to use the word compersion to talk about positive, empathic emotions, thoughts, attitudes, and behaviors in relation to other contexts. Like, oh, you're experiencing a lot of success in your work and your friendships and anything, and I'm just going to have some positive experience around that that is supporting and being on the same team with you. So that's also, I think, an important part of defining compersion is I think it's getting outside of just non-monogamy as a
Yeah.
context.
And it's beautiful to recognize that that's exactly how language works. That
Yes.
like language is what we make it. It's a living thing. And sometimes I hear people get a little pedantic about it. Like compersion is supposed to be for non-monogamy, or it came out of polyamory. So
Hmm.
yeah, but that's language evolves. That's the very nature of it. And
Hmm.
I love extending it into other areas of my life because it helps me remember that sometimes I struggle to feel compersion or to practice that attitudinal compersion in my non-monogamy, but I'm thriving in other areas of my life.
Hmm.
And that's just
Hmm.
such a great reminder that it's possible. It's within reach. I just need to figure out how to transfer that skill.
Yes, I love that. I think, we need to look at our relationship ecosystems not as just siloed, but as a garden or an ecosystem where we're the same person experiencing emotions in different contexts, and we can learn so much and grow so much. And when we grow in one area, then we can also grow in the others and just learn about ourselves.
And I
Yeah.
like this the um the research you do into something that connects us, that brings us together.
Hmm.
Um
Hmm.
in situations where we might be driven apart. You're working on how to keep us together. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, my own experience of struggling with compersion shows up most often in my friendships. And that's where I feel
Mm.
like my own personal study is, overcoming sometimes division and envy and competitiveness in my own friendships. So I think that's really important to look at each of our bottlenecks. Like, where is it difficult for us to feel like we can be on the same team with someone we love, and why, and how do we unlock more of our love?
Yeah. It's beautiful. It also is a strong reminder that we have a tendency to center romantic or sexually intimate relationships,
Hmm.
and that's another way that we can work to really diversify our relationship portfolio is to develop the capacity to notice our affect and how we're behaving toward our other close relationships. And when I hear you say that, I think, sure, yeah, if I think about compersion, most people pose it as an opposite of jealousy, but if you just as a thought experiment pose it as opposite of envy, which we
Mm-hmm.
often conflate envy and jealousy anyways, if you
Mm-hmm.
pose it as an opposite of envy, then that frees up an immense, like my heart feels something when I think about like what happens if I move toward compersion where I am stuck in competitiveness and comparison. Because I'm
Mm-hmm.
with you. That is a hard area, and we don't get a
Yeah.
lot of cultural support. Like there's not a lot of societal support and conversation about that. So
Yeah.
like usually it's just expected that if we have a friendship, it's just supposed to work easily, and if it doesn't, then
Right.
it's not good.
Yes. And I think we often subconsciously cut ourselves off from what could be really wonderful relationships because we're afraid of our own envy. Like
Yeah,
we might not associate with certain people because they just, we know instinctively that they will trigger our
yeah,
smallness, our insecurity, our feeling less than. And then we maybe steer away from those people for no other reason that we
right.
don't want to feel that.
And I mean, that to me, that's a complex coming up and getting us in its grips. And now we're stuck because the the reasons we can cite, they're real. Like you're
Mhm.
not
Yeah.
wrong. In fact, if you're caught by your envy, if you're caught in that complex, yeah, you probably will behave poorly. Like you may act out, you may distance yourself in ways that are playing out at a just under the surface level. And at that point, it becomes hard. I have to call myself back in
Hmm.
to the relating. And
Yes.
yeah, honestly, when I think about that, I think it's a lot of work to be a human. It's a lot of effort.
Yeah.
True that.
So the upside though of compersion is that it gives me something to aim at when I'm thinking about the work
Hmm.
and thinking about not just escaping envy or escaping jealousy, but instead working to foster something that I value being in the world. Like
Hmm.
I value this because I think of compersion as one of my aspirational values. Like it's a value for me, but it's one that I aspire to. It's not something that just like explodes within me easily and it just like boom, it's just there. Like
Hmm.
I'm gonna need
Hmm.
some kerosene and some matches to get that going. I'm gonna like I need some effort. So, but the idea that it's possible to nurture it, which I know is at the center of your work,
Hmm. Hmm.
gives me hope for that aspirational value that I have.
Hmm. Right. And I think that's the place where both of our work actually intersects. Your
Yeah.
jealousy roadmap, the last part of it is nurture compersion. And
Yeah, I
then,
always tell everybody like, these lead together. They
exactly,
they link right
exactly.
together.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, Marie, we were talking this morning about, what is it that gets in the way of compersion? And I think that there's so many things. We talked about the
Hmm.
myths surrounding compersion. So I think we should do some myth debunking.
I
Some like,
love debunking.
yes, let's debunk. Ken, do you
Okay.
want to kick us off with a particular myth? I know you have a list there.
Well, this is one that I really like. If you achieve compersion, you won't feel jealousy.
Ooh.
Like it's I don't know, a cure or yeah,
Yeah, like a magic
Mm.
spell.
like a magic spell.
Oh, we should actually work on that, Marie. We'll just invent a magic spell for it. We'll sell you the spell. There, boom, you're done.
There, you're
Yeah,
done. No more jealousy.
Right. Yes.
yeah.
And then we
Sorry,
can
it doesn't work
retire
that way.
because we'll be just super rich. Everyone will want that
Exactly.
spell. Everyone will be happy forever after.
Eh,
We'll be out of work.
yeah,
We
we'll
won't
be out
have
of
to
work.
do
We'll
all
be
this
Right up to
coaching
the
and
point that everybody comes back and sues you because it didn't work.
right up till then. Yeah,
I had an insight. I had a breakthrough of compersion, and then I was
And now
assailed by my jealousy again. I want my
yeah,
money
yeah.
back.
So, what do you think about achieving compersion and then never feeling jealousy again?
Unfortunately, that is, I don't know if I would even say unfortunately, but the reality is, it is a myth. These things are fluid. It's a little bit like saying, like, well, if you achieved joy, you can never feel sad again. Of course. Or if it's sunny today, you will never have rain. Things are
Yeah,
cyclical, things are contextual, and emotions are fluid.
yeah,
And what I learned, really above anything else in my work, is that compersion is highly dependent on context. And my book really talks about what that context is and what are the factors that might promote compersion, what factors hinder compersion, and these contexts are ever changing. Maybe your partner is choosing different partners, and that affects the level of compersion or jealousy that you might feel. Maybe your partner and your relationship is also evolving. Sometimes you're feeling more secure, more abundant, more at ease. Sometimes you're feeling less secure, and there is less of an abundance of love and resources. That,
Yeah,
of
and
course,
sometimes
impacts
you're
compersion.
right. Sometimes your threat bucket is just filled for reasons
Mm,
completely unrelated to this particular relationship.
yeah.
And if my threat bucket is filled, it makes sense that it would be easier to trigger the emotion of jealousy, which is a threat detection mechanism, right? It would
Hmm.
be if that threat is if the threat bucket is full, and then if I can't hold the if I can't hold tenderly the fact that I'm not a bad person for feeling jealousy, then I
Yeah.
could
Hmm.
definitely fall into a trap of thinking that somehow now maybe my compersion wasn't even real now that if I'm feeling jealousy again. That's one of the
Hmm.
dangers I see happening. Like if we pose these two as mutually exclusive, which to
Hmm.
me isn't the same thing as opposite. Something can be opposite but not mutually exclusive.
Yes,
And it puts us in dangerous territory.
Yeah, you bring that
absolutely.
you mutually exclusive. So, would you say that in your research, do you find people finding compersion, feeling compersion and jealousy simultaneously?
Absolutely, absolutely. Compersion and jealousy often do coexist. Me and Jolie actually coined a word, comper struggle, to talk about those moments when someone really wants to feel compersion and has potentially like attitudinal compersion or even some level of emotional compersion, but still also has a sense of threat or jealousy or grief or envy or something that is not
Yeah.
really, that might feel like it's opposed to the compersion, and then there's a tension, there's a struggle, and
Yeah.
that is not uncommon at all.
Hmm.
Yeah. It's beautiful to hold it. As a coach, when I'm working, when I'm with people, it's beautiful to hold the tension of those two um, dynamically different experiences. And as a human, it sucks. Like,
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
I don't enjoy the challenge of holding both of those, but trying to pace over one of them with the other. I don't find it
Yes.
really works very well. It's not a very efficient method.
Oh, it's difficult, and I
Yeah.
think it's important to learn to hold the tension, but also believe that sometimes actions are really what define us.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes possible to feel threatened, to feel sad, but then to not act in negative ways in our relationships. That doesn't mean we have to spiritual bypass, and pretend that the negative emotion is not there, but to be able to still treat our partners with love and kindness and
Yeah.
support, even if we're feeling a little wobbly inside. And to me, that's
Yeah.
more important than feeling happy and compersive all the time.
I agree 100%. I think we should highlight this point. The experience of being with your emotions, like, okay, I'm gonna be with this uncomfortable experience of jealousy in this moment, which, by the way, not all experiences of jealousy are uncomfortable. Some of them can be pleasurable, but that's for another
Mm,
episode.
yes.
But but just saying I'm gonna be with this feeling, I often find people miss the fact that yeah, you can be with the feeling, it can be uncomfortable, and you can still take the proactively positive action. And
Hmm.
Hmm.
I'm noticing some discourse around like, well, that would be abandoning myself. And I'm like, is it though? Is it
Hmm.
abandoning yourself to act in accordance with your values
Right.
and to behave in accordance with your values? And then maybe to revisit your relationship agreements. If you made agreements that actually lead you to a place where you're like, I can't do this. Maybe you're
Hmm.
overpromising.
Hmm.
And that's the spot where I find people get into, well, if I could just feel compersive, then I could uphold this agreement. But since I can't feel compersive, I can't uphold this agreement anymore. I'm like, oh, we got to separate feeling from behavior. We got to
Hmm.
allow separation of those two things. And it's hard.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, to me,
Yeah.
it's, conceptually, it might help to say, like, well, what if I have a really strong work ethic and I want to show up at work every day, doing my best, giving my best work? There's going to be days where I feel shitty. I don't want to get out of bed. I'm tired. I'm hungry. But if I had to only uphold my work ethic when I feel great, then my work ethic wouldn't mean much.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
So having
we
a
got to call
love
ourselves in.
ethic, exactly, having a love ethic or a compersion ethic,
Hmm.
which is kind of an expression that came from a conversation with Evita Sayers for my book,
Yeah.
I think is more important than trying to you bypass yourself into the feelings all the
Well,
time,
Yeah.
that leads
because
us
that's not going to
into
work.
Yeah.
another myth, which is that
Hmm.
compersion should come naturally and easily.
Ooh,
Yeah.
you want
What
to
do you
take that
think,
one,
Marie?
Lee?
I would say this. Um, if compersion should do anything, I'm immediately skeptical, but I would say I'm always hesitant to should anyone. And the idea that we can't intentionally build a skill, I think of compersion as a skill. And I think the conversations I've had with you over the last couple of years have reinforced that idea that compersion is a skill that I build and it does not need to come easily. And I would say it doesn't come easily for me, or at the very least, it generally comes and sits right next to my jealousy. And
Mhm.
that's just how it's been for me. But if I were to should on myself about that, I'd be in trouble. I really would. So I have learned this lesson the hard way. Yeah, it doesn't need to come naturally or easy. I'm not even sure what natural means, but I do hear
Yeah,
that. Like
it's
I hear it posed also when people talk about like, oh no other animals are jealous. It's only humans, so it should come more naturally. I'm like, dude, I have a
Hmm.
poodle.
we should
My
introduce them to the dog. Yeah,
I have a very jealous dog. I have
Uh-huh.
two other not
Uh-huh.
jealous dogs, but yeah, it.
Mhm.
I get very suspicious about the idea that something should come naturally because we're such social creatures.
Mhm.
So much of what we do is learned and responsive. So
Mhm.
you talk a lot about building the actual environment, like creating an environment that fosters compersion.
Yeah.
What's something that someone could do to foster compersion,
Well,
even if it's
there's
hard?
different categories. One is individually, what you can do within yourself to foster compersion, and that is cultivating, I would say, a strong commitment to non-monogamous values and
Mhm.
beliefs. And that is the work of dismantling the mononormativity within yourself. So that's kind of
I
the
call it unfucking the
mental.
mono mind.
I like that. It's a great label for that. So, yes, if you can unfuck your mono mind, then you will cultivate more compersion automatically. That
Yeah,
will kind of take away some of the beliefs of, well, if my partner is with someone else, I should feel in pain right now. That's just what I have to do because that's what I know how to do.
yeah,
The other part of that is cultivating self security and
mm,
that place within yourself that knows that you have your own back. And that goes a long way to having the kind of security that's important to then feeling peaceful or even happy when your partner is with someone else.
yeah. Cultivating self security is it's an interesting concept. I've heard people argue against it with the idea that we're social creatures and we need each other, like that security is endemically about the other. And to me, it seems like a yes and. Like it is about belonging, but we
Hmm.
tend to put all of our belonging and all of our security into like a singular relational point, and that's a brittle system. There's a difference between cultivating security with one person versus a community. And when I think about, do I have my own back? I don't just think about myself, but I think about, well, what are my other resources? Like, how am I resourcing myself in a diverse way in order to
Yes.
meet the challenges of my life?
Hmm.
Um, it's not just about the like attaching to myself, but how do I actually treat myself? Do I have I put all my emotional eggs in the basket of one person?
Absolutely. And I really
Mm.
like Jessica Fern's nested model of attachment. I was just rereading that chapter in Polysecure the other day
Hmm.
because she talks about, you know, secure attachment, not just with a person, but also with yourself, with the world, with the planet, with your communities. And I
Yeah.
think that's super relevant to this conversation here about compersion because the more security you have in all of your relationships, including your own relationship with yourself, then the more you kind of have that spaciousness
Yeah.
to support your partner's other relationships.
And this would be a good time to drop in the ability to be secure with yourself from a Jungian perspective is also being able to be with your shadow, to be with. And
Mm,
so I talk about that, and the process I've developed is called the inner council, but there are so many options that we have for being able to hold the parts of me that are wounded, that are struggling, that do not feel inclined to trust or to be compersive. If I can be a safe haven for those parts of myself, right? That's, to me, that helps me remember that I'm not talking about security as in I am alone in the world. I'm talking about security as in, do I have a connection to self? Do I have a connection to all of me, or are parts of me cut off and abandoned? And
mm,
I see people cut off their jealous parts all the
mhm,
time. They're
mhm,
cutting them off, and they're refusing to acknowledge. And I did this myself in the early days, refusing to acknowledge jealousy. And now we've got jealousy's in the shadow,
mhm,
and we're trying to nurture compersion and cut jealousy off. Well, it's going to be hard to have a secure sense of self if I have these different parts of me that one is valued and one is not. I've got
mhm.
a real disowned siblings
You
issue
kind of build
inside
up
here.
your
It's a
own
real
internal
mess.
insecurity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, I
It's
love that. I love that you said that. Actually, I had a research participant who I interviewed 4 or 5 years apart. And
mm,
the first time she was very much like, yes, I feel compersion most of the time in my relationships, but sometimes I still, I do feel a little bit of jealousy, but you could tell the way she was talking about it was kind of tense and she really wanted to hang on to compersion.
yeah.
The second time I interviewed her, and that is a Buddhist meditator who has been on a spiritual path for a long time and has been sitting with herself a lot. The second time she said, "You know what? I actually experience both more now that I'm more
Mm,
comfortable with myself and I've been doing a lot of mindfulness practice. I actually experience more jealousy, but I think it's just because I have more room within myself and I'm allowing myself to. And I can play with it, I can eroticize it, I can cry about it, but I'm not so afraid of it.
mhm.
But then I can also experience compersion, and it has more of this softness to it. It doesn't have to be the only thing I experience. So she was actually not saying that she had a linear progression in terms of
Yeah.
feeling more and more compersion over time. It was just more of everything as she got to know herself and accept herself more.
That makes perfect sense. I was just in a conversation with Siobhan and Rich from Poly Podcast, and we were talking about the ability to be with our complexity, and how it is it is one of the things that seems to happen when you really practice your relationship, when you get really intentional about relationships. But it's also something that you don't know. Like,
Hmm.
when you're following a relational script, it feels like you're doing all the holding of your feelings. You need to, like, it feels like that's all fine. And it's not till you're put in a position to have to really, really practice mindfulness. Like, real, like, wow, oh, I didn't know how much more there could be. I just wasn't aware. So one of the things we seem to expose ourselves to in a non-monogamous context is a more conscious relationship. And that is completely within the realm of any. We don't need non-monogamy for that. You can do
Hmm.
that in monogamy. It's often, I find, at least my clients, they just didn't think to. They didn't see the questions that there were to ask.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
love also that you're including compersion beyond non-monogamy, because it just doesn't need to be. We don't need to gatekeep compersion, right?
No. At least I
Which
don't think
is
we need to.
No, me either.
bringing us to another myth, which I think we totally just addressed, which is that compersion is only for polyamorous people. And I think we've
Mm,
been spending the past few minutes talking about how it's totally not.
yeah, I agree. And I think you're a great example of that because you didn't know the word polyamory, but you were open pretty much your whole adult life. And you, I experienced you as when we were friends before we had a romantic relationship. I experienced you as someone who was what I would now label compersive. Like you practiced the moves of compersion, but you didn't have any of the language. You didn't know the word compersion. You didn't know the word polyamory. You didn't
Yep.
know, you didn't know any of that,
And
and
I
yet there you
applied it
were.
in lots of other domains besides intimate relationships.
Which thank goodness, because you were kind of a jerk in a bunch of other
So
areas.
at least I had
So
that one redeeming quality.
I celebrate you.
I'm
I
a jerk,
celebrate
but
you.
I like when people get what they like. I like when they're happy.
That's actually exactly how at the
Yep.
early stages of our relationship, Marie, I would
Mhm.
tell him, I'm like, I love how happy you are for other people's happiness. Because he was kind of an
Mm.
asshole.
Yep. I
But he
didn't
Mm.
also
inspire that
had this.
happiness, but I was always happy to see it happen.
Amazing.
Baby steps.
Yep.
Growth takes
Hey.
time.
Yep.
Yeah, because if he were only an asshole, if anyone was just an asshole, then they would actually not want people to be happy. That's
Yeah,
the
exactly.
marker.
Yeah.
I was not a Grinch.
It was evidence. It was evidence. Yeah. Oh, we should do a Christmas special teaching the Grinch
Oh,
compersion.
oh yes, yes, we could role play.
I love that.
I
Okay,
Having
I
a
think
love
I
it.
therapy
think he
session with the Grinch.
I think he did learn compersion at the end. I think that's what that whole
I
show's about.
Yeah, it's like heart grew 3 sizes. I think
That's
yeah, we
right.
could totally role play a Grinch coaching session.
I
Grinch
Okay,
love
coaching. Okay.
that.
I'll
I
get
see this. I love it. Oh my goodness.
this is forming in my mind now. Okay. Um so another myth, feeling compersion makes you better at polyamory.
Mm.
Hmm.
Oh my goodness. I mean, from my perspective, no, your actions only if
That's
you're
it.
acting in
Yeah.
alignment with compersion. Like if you're making decisions because of that, but I
Nothing.
see
Yeah.
plenty of people. I mean, you weren't. You were actually, Ken, I'm going to call you in again. We were in a relationship that you have since labeled as abusive,
Yeah.
while you were also incredibly compersive toward
Yeah,
me.
it doesn't. So feeling something, feeling anything doesn't actually doesn't directly impact your ability to do anything.
Yeah.
It's all like your actions, the way I interacted with people around me. That's what determined my competence at relationship, and my feelings could affect it, but they can't change anything. I have to change the actions myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm. And I'll add something about this myth because I get a lot of people coming to me for coaching who experience a lot of erotic compersion,
Mm-hmm.
and they actually really want their partner to have sex with more people because they
Yep.
get off on it. And they're
Yep.
like,
Me
I'm
too.
the
That's me.
most, oh yeah? They're like,
Yeah.
I'm the
That's me.
most polyamorous person ever
I would never
because I
say
have
that,
all this
but
compersion. And that is kind of a double-edged sword because I think
mm-hmm.
it can be really fun and it can lead a lot of people to, you know, the joys of openness and the joys of polyamory. It can be an entry point for a lot of folks. But sometimes it can become almost more like a kink or function like something that is more about your own sexual gratification rather than wanting your partner to be happy. Like I've seen
Totally.
people like push their partner into sexual relationships that their partner didn't really want, more
Yep.
for themselves, kind of under the pretense of compersion.
I have felt that so strongly, Maria. I'm so glad you're naming it. It's been something that I struggle with because that was one of the very first things I identified that I liked about non-monogamy.
Mhm.
And Ken's pretty demisexual,
Mm.
and he would fall under the category I think of demi slut, right? Like
Oh.
he can be really really slutty, but
You could say demi, or you could say lazy.
whatever.
Go either way.
No, but he's just he's into who he's into, and
Mhm.
I have struggled in the past with like, oh, but I'm longing to feel all the erotic compersion that I get. And that's not mine. Like, that's not my business. It's none
Mm-hmm.
of my business. But it's compelling.
Mm-hmm.
And there is also, I've seen it happen in poly circles, especially like large community gatherings where there's a bit of like one-upmanship. I see people kind of like being super proud of themselves for being
Mm-hmm.
compersive and having proof of their compersion because
Mm.
their partner is sleeping with so many people or whatever, and like, look at
Yeah.
me. And it's just all really questionable.
And then
Mm.
there's a compersive resonance that happens. So you want to see me sleep with more people. So you're like, hey, go sleep with more people. It's like, I haven't found anybody I really want to, but you like it, and I like to see you happy. So then I
Mm.
take action, and like there can be this resonance back and forth,
Yeah.
which, like everything else, means the more conscious these things are, the more intentional and explicit they are, the easier you can navigate that stuff. Because if neither one of us ever said anything about that, then we could end up in all sorts of situations that neither one of us really wanted to be in.
We're in like a slutty echo
A
chamber.
slutty
It's
echo
like,
chamber.
Oh my gosh. I am reminded of the work of Betty Martin, the wheel of consent and the
yeah.
quadrants of
Mhm.
who is this
Yep.
for?
Who's taking?
Yep.
Who's, yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess as long as we're clear, who this is for and who's doing what, then it can be all wonderful and consensual and compersive all around.
And we have to be careful because now, do our other partners know what our
Mhm.
motivations are? Because that's where I think it
Yeah.
gets really, really sticky is
Mm.
if Ken were being performative for me, because I'm a
Mhm.
bisexual woman who has been put in the position to be performative for other people's boyfriends a lot.
Mm.
And I'm like,
Yes.
oh, I thought she liked me. She doesn't like me. She was performing for him.
And that sucks.
And
Mm.
then
I
my
would
Mm.
heart's
not want.
broken. And I
Yeah.
don't ever want that to be the case. I don't want Ken to be performing
Mhm.
acts that someone could interpret in a particular way, which intimacy is that. So this is really like we're getting into the depths of how we have to negotiate and bring transparency into the room.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of people struggle with that because they're afraid that their chances go down if they're transparent.
Mm.
I'm like, well,
Oh.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess they do because you're going to have ethical conscious relationships. So
Mhm.
you're
And
right,
it's
lying
worth
might
it.
work better.
It's
My
worth it to
chances go
narrow the
down.
pool, but operate in
Yeah.
transparency and make sure that the people you're engaging with are a full yes. That will serve you
Yeah.
down the line.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. Oh goodness, yeah. We could go there. You know what, Maria? I thought I heard you almost say when I was talking about showing up to a large poly gathering and people are kind of like comparing. There's I see a sort of king of the mountain game being played around compersion. Like I have the most compersion, and I'm now thinking about how comparison and competitiveness enter
Yes.
in through compersion, and I don't think I've really thought about that, but
Sneaky, sneaky.
yikes. Yikes.
Talk about shadow work.
Right. And especially in our community level, right? Like
Hmm.
hard enough at our, say, polycule or individual level. But then you take it to, I'm thinking about like my local poly circles have, there are hundreds of people in any given group. And then there, at a gathering, there might be 20 or 50. And yeah, like, are we accidentally getting into some competitiveness just in our storytelling, just in
Hmm.
our way of sharing?
Yeah.
And is that actually fostering the kind of community that we mean to be building? And because I think it happens unconsciously. We don't mean to be doing
Yes.
it, but
Hmm.
it happens. Mm,
Totally. Yeah. I had a
yeah.
client the other day actually tell me that she was in a sex positive polyamorous community and she was with a group of women actually, like talking about how many orgasms they had had. And there was this bravado about it. This, like, oh yeah, I have so many multiple orgasms. Wow, I'm the queen of orgasms. And this is
Yes.
interesting because it can look sex positive on the surface, but deep down it's actually shaming and creating this not sex positive atmosphere
Yeah.
for people who have a
I
different
have
experience.
not.
Hmm.
Right. I have like, yeah, 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 absolutely. Oh, that makes tons of sense because the experience of orgasm is also something we can't share it. There's no objective truth to it. There's just how I experience it. And
Yeah.
I can find myself in comparison with myself. Like last year I had like a totally different experience of my orgasm than this year. And so we can easily find ourselves in self-shame or in othering shame when we get into
Hmm.
a comparing experiences mode.
Gosh, and these things are
Mm.
very subtle because you can share in a way that's celebratory and inclusive and just really
Yeah.
fun and friendly. But you can also share to, yeah, like one up each other or to boast or to make yourself feel
Yeah.
better. Like it's really subtle, like the why behind what we share and how we share.
Yeah. Oh, that's so tender.
Yeah.
So as we get winding down, one more myth: feeling conversion is necessary for happy non-monogamy.
Oh, Marie, you got to take that
I'll
one.
take that one because I have a very particular take on that.
Yeah.
And that is emotional compersion, embodied compersion, not necessary. I think it's a bonus when you can get it. If the context is good, if you're experiencing it emotionally, that's awesome. But if not, if you're experiencing attitudinal compersion or benevolent neutrality, which to me is just interpreting your partner's other relationships as either positive or just okay, that I would say is more of a necessity for happy non monogamy. Because the alternative might be to be in distressed states most of the time. And that's
Yeah.
not happy. You know, that's hard to sustain, that can be harmful. But
Yeah.
yes, attitudinal compersion, yep, I recommend cultivating it. Emotional
Yeah.
compersion, it's a bonus.
I really appreciate that answer, and I've been thinking a lot about it because when I talk about the jealousy roadmap, I'm often walking people out of the idea that jealousy just happens to them and there's nothing they can do about it. And
Hmm.
I would
Hmm.
say jealousy just happens to you and there's something you can do about it.
Hmm.
And when we get to that fifth step, nurturing compersion, from that embodied perspective, I always tell people, like, please let go. You don't have to do this. You don't have to force yourself through this, and please don't perform it. Like,
Hmm.
don't don't act as though you're compersive to try to get poly points. There is
Hmm.
no one's going to stamp your poly card. You're good. But this idea that cultivating attitudinal compersion, it really sounds, and correct me if I'm wrong because this is your area of expertise, it sounds like a practice of in an ongoing manner shifting your state of mind, your values, making sure your values align with your non-monogamous philosophy, clarifying what your philosophy is, and then making
Hmm.
sure that your actions line up with that. And
Hmm.
those practices, so they sound like they're foundational elements of getting to experience embodied compersion, but yeah, they also just sound like healthy non-monogamous behavior and something that's not going to happen just spontaneously. It is actually a cultivation of figuring out what is your philosophy, what are there are no objective polyamorous values. It's again, there's no committee that's going to tell you like you have to do this, this, and this. So you have to clarify that for yourself and then actually live it. That is, it's both freeing and huge at the same time. Like I feel liberation from reminding myself that nobody else is in charge of my ethics. I am in charge of my ethics. I am in charge of my
Hmm.
philosophies,
Hmm.
and that I have to continually act in accordance with my stated values. And one of my stated values is that I value my partner's autonomy and agency in all domains of their life. So like in order to live into that aspirational value, I have to act in alignment with attitudinal compersion. So that just
Hmm.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, but I think when we show up on the scene, I see that taking years. I don't know how it looks from your vantage, but I see it taking years for people to even just comb this stuff out and unfuck that mono mind enough to get like, oh, that's where I've been stepping on my own shoelaces and not
Hmm.
not
Hmm.
seeing where I was undermining the possibility of compersion for myself.
Yeah. Well, again, I'll come back to the idea that it's contextual. I don't think some people get lucky. Maybe they open their relationship with a previously monogamous partner and their partner goes and dates someone who is less threatening. Maybe that person is married and busy with other relationships, and maybe they just, like how they are, how they look, how they operate in the world is less threatening.
Yeah, all
And then
those
maybe years down the
mysterious
line,
little things.
Yeah.
yes, exactly. There's a
Yep.
constellation of factors that can create a result. And maybe years down the line, that same person is going to have a new metamor that then really gets them to feel more jealousy.
Yeah.
And then it's the other way around for many people. Like they might start out with a very tough situation with a lot to grapple with. And it takes them years to get to a place of just feeling okay because the hand that they've been dealt at all different levels is really tough. But then maybe they have an easier path after that. So I would not necessarily assume, like that people who are just starting out a non monogamous path will have like a very difficult time at first or not. I mean, usually there is kind of a progression. I think, most people start out and they have to confront a lot just to change their paradigm. But I would just go in with an open mind.
You know, I think this it's important to note that that open mind, I don't know, it feels a little perverse, but I actually find in my practice that people who entered non-monogamy because their partner was interested, like their partner was the
Hmm.
inspiration, so they're currently monogamous but their partner is the inspiration. I find in the long term they actually sometimes even do better. I don't want to say always because it's definitely not always.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm not even sure it's most, but there's a strong contingent of people who do better because they do the work of actively, like nothing inside of them is just inspiring, like, I want more.
Hmm.
Instead, they are unpacking their stuff, they're dealing with their shadow, they're learning how to navigate jealousy from a place of real trouble. And so when stuff changes down the line, they've already done all this foundational work.
Hmm.
Whereas
Hmm.
somebody who's just like, I mean, I myself, I fell in love with someone, explosions.
Hmm.
It was years of later that I was like, oh, there's a whole bunch of stuff I never had to do, right? I didn't,
Hmm.
oh, there's stuff to unpack now. And I think simply allowing for the fact that we're never done with this work. We're
Yeah,
just not, we don't get to a spot where we've checked off the compersion box or solved the jealousy puzzle. We're
that
just
is
in
so
it.
true. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And can I add one last myth before we close?
Please.
Because there's one that I just was thinking about today as I was preparing for this episode, and it's not something we talk about a lot, and I've never actually talked about it publicly. It's the idea that if my partner really loved me, they would feel compersion for all of my
Mm.
Ooh.
relationships. And I've definitely fallen into that trap of resenting my partner for not having conversion when I was dating someone else and
Yeah.
thinking like, well, they just don't love me. They just don't love me enough to feel
Mm.
compersion in this moment. And I want to cry thinking about that and just thinking about kind of the myopic aspect
Yeah.
of that
Yeah.
interpretation because
Yep.
sometimes our partner really loves us and maybe they're afraid we're going to get hurt. They're afraid our relationship is going to get hurt. They are dealing with their own stuff. It's not a reflection of whether or not they love us. And I think
Yeah.
that's super important to learn, for those of us who are like the enthusiastic polys who think everyone should always feel compersion.
Yeah. I think that's beautiful, Marie, and I appreciate your self-disclosure there because the wanting a partner to feel compersive about you can be really it can put you into a spot where you're manipulative. I've been there where I it feels like a place where I can take the moral high ground. I could
Yeah.
stand there and be like, well, this is a good emotion. This is a good thing to feel. This is a better way to be. And we can get into kind of a spiritual, like argument with a person and how, like, what an unloving thing for us to do. to
Mhm.
be
Mhm.
to be trying to force
Yes.
someone to experience something versus holding it in an open, like, well, your feelings are your feelings.
Mhm.
And it also feels a little, yeah, you said myopic, and I would say there's a selfishness. Please feel
Mhm.
compersion because then I don't have to feel guilty. But what if
Yes.
I deal with my guilt? What if I actually continue to return my agency to myself and say,
Mhm.
you're having feelings,
Mhm.
and that doesn't mean that I need to take on guilt. I'm going to just be present to this. And that's hard
Mhm.
because a lot of us were taught guilt is the appropriate response to our partner having any difficult feeling.
And
Right.
that can lead us into a conversation about what our relationship is for and how, like, to what extent have we each signed up to help each other through feelings and autonomy versus enmeshment and all these things. But um, the more clear that is, maybe the clearer conversations like that can go. But what you were just describing, Jolie, is about kind of taking care of my own stuff, like deciding, oh, this is mine, and I I can decide not to hand it over to my partner and just deal with it myself. And that can be some hard work.
Yeah. It's it's just reminding me how much all of this, and I know you and I have talked about this before, Marie, that um, a path of non-monogamy or a path of any conscious relating style, so what I would call an individuation-oriented relationship, um, it is it is a spiritual undertaking. It is a philosophical undertaking. It's not a small thing to move out of implicit assumption into, wow, I'm going to know myself with all of this mirror right in front of me. So,
Mhm. Mhm.
if all this sounds like a lot, yeah, because it
It is.
is. It is
And
a
now,
lot.
Mhm.
Marie, you've been researching this facet, which is um, which can help us um, bring a different approach to some of the experiences that we've been dealing with of jealousy or envy, or in some cases neutrality,
Mhm.
because that can suck all on its own. Um, so
It's beautiful.
that's beautiful. Yeah.
So, Marie, tell everyone how to make sure that they've got a copy of the book. Like, where should they go? Where should they find it? And where should they find you?
Ah, thank you, Jolie. So people can go to my website, which is whatiscompersion.com, and find my book there, but you can also find it Barnes and Nobles, Amazon.com, or Roman and Littlefield, which is my publisher's name. So you can find it at least in these three places. You can also find me at What is Compersion. I do free 30 minutes introductory calls for folks who are interested in coaching with me. And I coach on anything between dating, compersion, monogamy, non monogamy. You don't have to be a fully, like full blown poly person to benefit from coaching. I just want to say that. And people can also follow me on Instagram at Love Insight Dating.
Yeah, I strongly recommend following Marie's writing. It is strong
Definitely.
as hell. It is insightful. Your handle is well chosen. Love Insight
Mm.
Dating is you have so much insight to share, and I'm so deeply grateful that you shared it with us. Thank you for being here, Marie.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you both. It's so fun to connect. I wish we could talk all day.
All day. We talk to you all the time. It is absolutely imperative to me that we get to hear from you as well.
Yes, please.
So, we'd love to invite you to join us. Join Ken and I. We're holding monthly Ask Me Anythings. You can show up, bring your questions from podcast episodes, from your relationships, bring questions about non monogamy, about individuation, about relationship skills. We would love to share space with you. We're hosting these AMAs free of charge for our podcast listeners. You are the Playing with Fire community, and it matters a ton to us that we connect with you directly. So
Oh,
go,
I would so love to hear your questions, and it'd be so awesome.
yeah. Go to joliehamilton.com/AMA and you'll find a way to sign up real quick. and get an invitation to join us in a small group where we're going to get together and talk about all things non monogamy, individuation, and relationships.